Go ahead and stop me if you've heard this one before, but nothing feels the same since 2012. Or 2012 to 2016 music is way better than now. Or the last good year for movies was 2019. This is what I like to call the Golden Age Fallacy. The idea that no matter what, life was better in the past, and the present sucks, and the future will suck more. The thing about the Golden Age Fallacy is, nostalgia makes you blind. People forget the bad and only remember the good, about whatever time they choose to be nostalgic about. I think 3 major things contribute to this. 1. People are always going to naturally love whatever time they were a teenager in. Go ask somebody who grew up in the 1960s when the best time to be alive was, and they will go on and on about how great the 60s and 70s were. They'll tell you how awesome the fashion was and how epic all the movies were and how amazingly talented all the musicians of their day were. Which may be totally true, but they will conveniently leave out, segregation, the Cold War, the Vietnam War. This is because people tend to have a cognitive bias for whatever time they were teenagers in, which leads them to something I like to call rosy retrospection. Or I don't like to call it that, I just looked up on Google my thoughts and that's what came up. Anyway, in which people will remember everything they loved about the past and put aside all of the bad. It's why the phrase, things just aren't how they used to be, is so common. It's also why we literally see 2020 nostalgia edits. People remember the fun parts of quarantine and cool TikTok trends and gaming with their friends and forget a literal global pandemic that killed millions of people and ruined thousands of lives. Anyway, 2. People who make media and art like to pay homage to the time that they grew up in. You notice how from 2016 to now, there's been about 100 projects that romanticize the 80s and 80s culture? That's because the writers and directors, singers, and other artists who grew up in the 80s are now the ones making the media that we consume. So a lot of what they are going to make is meant to capture the essence of whatever time feels nostalgic and safe to them. Then this leads people consuming said media to have an affinity for that time, wishing that they could have grown up in that era and feel what it was like to be young and free during those times, which once again causes people to forget all of the negative aspects of a given time and romanticize it. 3. People feel safer thinking about the past because there is certainty in it. The future is scary and unknown and lacks certainty. If something seemingly bad happens, like for example a pandemic or a new war, people have no idea what the outcome may be, so fear builds. So it's much easier to find certainty and security within past memories, because those events have already played out. Even if the past event is way worse than what the present is, you can still see how things in the end may have worked out with the power of retrospective, but you cannot do that with a future event. My point with this video is not to claim that the past sucks and life is amazing right now, because it definitely isn't. My point is that every time in history has had amazing aspects and horrible aspects. And right now, in 2025, or whenever you're listening to this, is no different. A lot of people are going to focus on the negatives of now and be prisoners of the moment and tell you that things just aren't like they used to be. But in reality, that is not true. Life didn't all of a sudden become worse after 2016. Music didn't stop being good after 2012. Film didn't peak in the early 2000s, and the 80s wasn't the greatest time to be a teenager, and 2020 was not a time to be romanticized. But it wasn't all that bad either in some ways. There's just always been a lot of good and a lot of bad with everything. So just enjoy life, because in 10 or 15 years, you are going to look back at where you are at now and wish you could be in this stage, in this era, and have lots of nostalgic thoughts and feelings for wherever you happen to be at. So just try to be optimistic, because hope of what can be is the only way to incite change of what will be.